to Straight Talk with Supply Chain Insights. My name is Laura Cesari, and I'm the founder of Supply Chain Insights. And today I have the wonderful opportunity to interview Annette Clayton, who is the CEO and president of Schneider Electric. I have a lot of respect for Schneider Electric and a lot of respect for Annette. So Annette, thanks for joining the show today.
Thank you, Laura. It's great to be with you.
So Annette, this whole series is designed to help supply chain leaders of the future, those that are coming into the supply chain domain, to think about their careers. And what I ask people to do is walk through your career and talk how you made decisions. And as you look back, what you would have told a younger Annette or someone entering the workplace.
Thanks, Laura. I mean, when I go to the very root of it, for me, I mean, I'm really a farm girl. I grew up on a farm, and we did everything ourselves, fixed everything ourselves, and I actually paid for college just by repairing and repainting old pickup trucks with my dad and taking things apart and putting them back together. And I guess that led to engineering roots. I started my career with General Motors in the factories, learning lean manufacturing, the Toyota production system that General Motors at the time was really focused on. I went to Dell, and I think, Laura, that's where I met you, where I really mastered planning and procurement. And then Schneider has really been a study in, global and really competing in completely different ways and operating in 65 countries around the world and more than 200 factories. And, one of the things that, I would tell my younger self is, walk through those doors of opportunity when they happen. I think especially sometimes women in the supply chain, they're looking to be completely qualified for every role before they take it. And when I look at my own career, there were a number of roles there where I have to tell you, I felt like I was faking it before I was making it and really learning on the fly, because it's very hard. Supply chain is a broad topic, and it's very hard to be an expert in everything. And you do need to learn along the way. So again, I would just encourage people to walk through those doors of opportunity.
Walk through the doors before you may be ready, and don't second guess yourself, right? Sometimes I see women trying to have perfection in a skill before they'll raise their hand. So I think that's wonderful advice. And then, learning about how things work. Now, when I watch you with your teams, Annette, you've been masterful, I think, in defining a supply chain strategy and leading a team for change. Can you tell me a little bit about the skills required that you had to develop to do that?
Laura, I believe that everybody needs a management process, and mine is policy deployment, and there are many, so I'm not selling policy deployment shares, but what I am saying is that you need a management process that has you working on the tactical and the day-to-day execution, but also has you equally working on transformation. And as leaders, that's one of our most important points. We get the right people on the team and we define the right North Star. And I use a process called Hoshin. It's strategy on a page. It's the North Star. It's all the things that we're trying to get done. And one of the things I've realized in my career in supply chain is what I used to kind of define as a 3-year plan is no longer relevant. Things are changing so fast in supply chain now that, I actually believe that you have to have an annualized plan, because there are things happening in our world that are really changing how you look at supply chain. I mean, we take, the fourth industrial revolution, for example, advanced robotics, 3D printing, machine learning, the Internet of Things. These are all accelerating. And I think in a COVID world, the topic of sustainability is also accelerating for supply chains. And this is all happening while we're seeing more and more black swan events that are impacting our supply chain. So I believe in really leveraging the team to create this North Star based on what's actually happening in the macroeconomics around us.
Now, your North Star has been one of the clearest that I've seen, and I think your ability to manage the team has been one of the best that I've seen. What have you learned about yourself through that whole journey?
It's interesting, but I've learned that I'm a better conductor than I am, a creator of solutions. in that, we've always talked about getting the right people on the bus, and sometimes getting the right people on the bus is really getting people that are better at solving problems than you are, getting people that are ready to take the next roles, and frankly, in the digital age, getting people who aren't actually burdened with the history in the past and have a new lens on the same old topics. And that's really what I've taken away from all of that myself, is that I don't have to have all the answers. I just have to have a team that can work together to get all those answers. And I believe in the concept of high-performing teams, and I believe that it's a science, high-performing teams, having collective accountability, having a true North Star, having ways that measure and celebrate success, spending time together, and developing high levels of trust. I think this is what creates high-performing teams.
Now, what are the elements of a conductor or a successful conductor? I like that imagery. What makes you good at it?
I think I'm a good listener, Laura. I listen to what's on people's minds. I take the concerns. I create psychological safety for them to really communicate the things that are worrying them, the things that are on their mind. And frankly, to let the team know they're not alone, that together, and I know it maybe sounds a little corny, but it's quite true that together we're much more powerful and we're much more capable together than we are as individuals.
Well, Annette, people all around the world will listen to this podcast. So we'll have people in schools that are working on supply chain degrees, or people that are just entering the workforce. What one piece of advice would you have for people that are new into the career, or people that are aspiring to be the next Annette Clayton?
I think about this role of Chief Supply Chain Officer and all the things that led up to it in my own career. And I look at the great examples we have in our industry of supply chain professional turned business professional running companies. My former colleagues, Mary Barra of GM, Denise Johnson of Caterpillar, Patty Poppy, who was just recently named the CEO of PG&E, Beth Ford at Land O'Lakes. I mean, there's great, myself, there's just great examples of supply chain professionals becoming, top executives in the company. And I think we should remember that supply chain is a great place to learn. It's a great place to learn the skills of the business, but maybe just as importantly, learning leadership. In supply chain roles, you have great opportunity to really hone in your leadership skills, which, regardless of the role, are so critically important.
Absolutely. And I think it's become a more pivotal and important position over the last 3 decades. Your perspective?
It's really true. If you think about what we've all been working on in the last, especially 2 decades, but we could say 3, is really driving, more efficiency and driving out waste in our supply chains. And frankly, they're quite efficient. And in many cases, they're so efficient that these events, these black swan events that are happening to us now, are really disrupting our supply chains. I think about, in the 1980s, for example, there were 200 global climate events, that impacted the supply chain. I think if we look at this past decade, there's more than 800 per year now happening. So that's a 4-fold increase in things that can disrupt your supply chain. So I'm really of the mindset that business resiliency now has to take the forefront as we face a decade of more disruption to our supply chain. So how long can your supply chain survive an incident? And then how long does it take to recover? And how much revenue risk are you willing to actually have happen to the company? And so supply chain professionals being more and more connected to the business, more and more understanding of the revenue impact of the decisions they make, I think is critical. So I see the supply chain as a critical C-suite role that more and more CEOs are pulling to the very forefront of their business decisions. So I really believe it's the decade of the supply chain professional.
Well, and as you think about that decade of the supply chain professional, any skills or things that people should focus on to, get ready for this next decade?
Well, Laura, you and I have many times talked about planning, and obviously planning is one of the foundations. And if you can be a world-class planner, you actually are creating the best nervous system you can for your company. But I would also contend that looking around the corner and seeing what could happen and what may happen and getting better at predicting, in some cases, what we would traditionally think about as the unpredictable, and just really having a plan for every part, understanding and modeling your supply chain flow, whether it's in the group, inside the group, outside the group, the raw materials, and again, calculating that time to survive and that time to recover so that you can get a plan for, your highest revenue impacting assets, and so that you can protect the company. I think you become the best friend of the CFO and certainly of the CEO and the shareholders if you can do that. And that's not saying everything, our primary responsibility, which is deliver on the promise that we made to our customers.
Yeah, and that's just not using planning software well. I think that's a whole aptitude about taking the knowledge of the business and thinking about the what if and driving it home. And, that's so important. Well, Annette, you've been great on the show. Is there any one piece of wisdom or anything you'd like to say to close the discussion today?
I think, really keeping in mind that, supply chain is fraught with opportunity to be disrupted. And, what I've seen and what I've talked to so many of the supply chain team members about right now is resiliency. I mean, COVID has created a really challenging year for everyone. There's so many issues at play, and it seems like many of the supply chain professionals have gone from one crisis to the next. So my best advice is really, what I talked about earlier, which is a management process that allows you to actually work on the tactical and the crises that's in your hand today, but also work on those transformations that, help your life and the company's performance tomorrow, and really dividing your time between what I call mode 2, transform the business, and mode 1, run the business, and really making sure you're spending time on both.
Well, thank you so much. This is Street Talk with Supply Chain Insights, talking to Annette Clayton today. Annette is one of the people that I admire in the supply chain. Thanks for joining the show.
Thank you, Laura, and thanks for your leadership and impact on supply chain leaders, both now and in the future.
All the best.